All right, good evening. It is 6 o'clock. We'll call our meeting to order. This is a special commissioners meeting on May 25th, 2020. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so our special meeting tonight is to discuss the American Rescue Plan and the funds that Medina County is receiving through that. The plan itself was passed March 11th, was actually signed into law March 11th, 2021, and provided $1.9 trillion in economic stimulus for the country. It did a variety of different things, but among those things, it extended unemployment benefits and enhanced unemployment benefits. It provided the $1,400 per person direct payments to individuals. It gave a 15% increase to food stamp benefits, provided for grants for small businesses, funds for housing and rental assistance, and provided $350 billion in economic aid to states, cities, villages, counties, and other units of local government. And included within that is $60 billion to counties across the U.S. And again, did a whole host of other things. But Medina County, over the next couple of years, will be receiving just under $35 million, correct, Scott? In funds that we will have the ability to allocate and invest in our county. So the purpose for tonight's meeting is just to talk about the process by which the funds will be allocated, and in terms of projects and what have you. We'll discuss the parameters of what is an allowable project and what can be funded. We may make a couple of decisions on specific projects that are smaller in nature, but there's some urgency to getting them accomplished. But our primary focus is going to be on the process. So with that, Amy and/or Scott, I'm going to talk about allowable uses.
Thank you. So I will start by saying that this overview document that was published yesterday by the National Association of Counties did a really great job of condensing what we were all reading, which was the 151 pages of this interim final rule. So just a couple pieces, just like Commissioner Hudson introduced, the framework is set for this to, and this is a quote here, to help turn the tide on the pandemic, address its economic fallout, and lay the foundation for a strong and equitable recovery. And the counties are described as having broad flexibility so long as they can demonstrate the activities support the public health response or that recipients of the recovery funds have experienced harm from the pandemic. Okay? There are 5 major categories that are identified for the allowable use of funds, and we're providing some examples here this evening, but these are not meant to be all-inclusive. They're just meant to give you examples of what could potentially be categorized in each funding category. So the first one is to support the public health response. So for that one, examples of allowable funding would include PPE purchases, capital investments to mitigate COVID-19 in public facilities, ventilation improvements in congregate and healthcare settings, COVID-19 treatment and medical services, enhanced behavioral and mental health services, payroll support for local health and safety workforce, improved public health programs, and to address disparities in public health outcomes. And then the second bucket is to address negative economic impacts. So examples under that category would include assistance to households, small businesses and nonprofits, aid to impacted industries, job training to unemployed or underemployed workers, services to address individuals experiencing homelessness. It includes support for tourism, travel, and hospitality sectors, and then services for qualified census tract and other proportionately impacted areas of our community. And then the third bucket is to replace public sector revenue loss. And this is permitted use of funds to support government services up to the amount of lost revenue experienced during the pandemic. And it's calculated including total revenues from taxes, charges, and miscellaneous general revenue. And they include a formula that has you compare pre-pandemic 2019 revenues, and then 4.1% annual growth is applied to it, or what you can demonstrate in your 3 fiscal years prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. And in our case, that was a 4.13, so we were just 0.03% higher than what they had included in the guidance. And then the fourth area is premium pay for essential workers. And this is defined as additional compensation to both county employees and other essential workers in the community facing the greatest health risks due to their service. And they're advising that this prioritize low and moderate income persons. And the definition of essential work involves regular in-person interactions or regular physical handling of items also handled by others. So it's that point-to-point contact. And then the fifth bucket is for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. And this has a lot of room. Examples include drinking water, infrastructure projects such as building or upgrading facilities, transmission, distribution, and storage systems. And then on the wastewater side, it includes construction, improvement, or repairs to treatment plants. It includes controlling non-point source pollution, flooding control, creation of green infrastructure, and also in this category is the provision to unserved or underserved locations, new or expanded broadband access. There are some timelines. Just want to cover these real quick. So the funds cover costs from March 3rd of 2021 through December 24th of 2024. And the funds have to be incurred or obligated by December 31st of 2024, and they have to be expended with all work performed and completed by December 31st of 2026. So you've got those 2 additional years to complete out what you've obligated.
Which you have to appropriate.
Correct. And then consideration is giving retroactively, this is the only category, only to application of premium pay. If that were pursued, and that can go back to the start of the public health emergency, is defined as January 27th of 2020. So we are scheduled to receive that first half of the $34.9 million this week, and then the second half will come in 12 months from now, so it'll be near the end of May 2022. But just also wanted to let you know that even though we're just now receiving the funds, the first status report is due August 31st of 2021 in a yet to be defined form.
Do we have the exact figure for next week or no? Not really.
It's 17.45 million.
Just under 17.5.
Just under 17.5.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you think that'll hit this week?
We were told, well, at least according to some of the webinar information that we've understood, once you did the registration, which was performed last Thursday, it was taking an average of 4 business days for them to get through the approval process and issuing the dollars to the respective counties.
And the individual that's going to be, that has to register with that ID.B, that was the auditor's office?
Correct.
Correct? Okay.
Correct. I'm going to go ahead and, may I sit down?
Sure, have a
Okay.
seat.
But I'll answer any questions.
So, what do you want to do?
I have a suggestion that we should focus on what we're getting next week, 17.45, and maybe hold off till the end of the year. We don't know what could happen with some of our departments, the needs, wants. I don't think it's actually responsible to incur all 35 million right now. Right now, maybe do part of it now and then wait till the end of the year to discuss the rest of it to see where our needs, what direction our needs are.
Are we saying any project, I guess, wouldn't be included in our initial list, might likely be part of the budget we would adopt at the beginning of the year then? Whenever the departments are, we're going to be having hearings in October, starting in October.
Right.
Would we also have them likewise submit any potential projects that would fit within this category for that additional money coming in? Or are we talking about keeping it a totally separate process like we're doing now?
So Scott, when this money is received, it's going to go in the general fund, right?
No.
So what happens to it? Because I think, Steve, this bears on
Okay,
your
got it. Okay,
question.
all right, yeah.
No, there'll be a special fund that's set up, and the money will go into that special fund and be expended from that special fund.
Okay, so I would suggest that we separate the two
Okay.
and keep them entirely
And
separate.
I'm not saying that we couldn't, like, on something that would take a longer term, that we couldn't go over the 17.45. I'm just saying that I think we should reserve some of it for later to see where we are and what we need.
Yeah,
Just-
I think that makes some sense.
Mhm.
I was thinking that we should have some sort of formal application process. So, I mean, like we did for the small business grants.
Mhm.
It wasn't a very complicated,
No.
but we had
It was time consuming.
a standardized, but there
Yes,
was a
right.
standardized approach to submitting the grant request.
Mhm.
And that we developed some kind of an application that would follow.
And have the grantee list which of the 5 categories they believe their request
Right.
falls under and why.
Well,
Yeah.
that seems
And-
like,
and-
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, by the chatter you see in the email list, with the CCAO, various counties are doing exactly that.
Mhm.
An application and a process review. I mean, all of them are saying the same thing. We're going to take our time
Mhm.
and we're going to try to, spend responsibly,
Mhm.
but we're also going to have to evaluate this. And so nobody's in a hurry to start spending any of this money,
Right.
by all appearances. And so, but all of them it appears to be that they're setting up. And maybe as they're starting to develop theirs, we could even take a look and see what they're using in terms of process. I mean, somebody designs a little tweak to our process, all the better, I think.
Well, I think we had a very good process with the small business
Right,
grants.
right.
I mean,
I wasn't here
went-
for that, so,
That
yeah.
went very well, so.
We did 3 rounds of that.
Right.
Right, right. So I think we could follow, again, a standardized process that we
Mhm.
can put out there and folks know what it is and how to apply for it. Do we want to set any deadlines for submission of projects, or how?
I think we should, for at least whatever we're going to allocate for this year. I mean, at some point, we have to start discussing and picking.
But some of these we know are going to come sooner than others. I mean,
Yes.
We already have our preliminary list. I know personally, and there's some like, yeah, we're going to end up being smaller, but yeah, more immediate need. We need. Other these are like, well, we're going to take a month or two or a little bit longer to kind of put together. Every project has its own timeline
Mhm.
based on what's going on. So that's what I'm thinking is, let's design our process and then figure out what deadline we want to set. But I think we need to have clarity regarding the minor civil units, the townships issue.
Well-
Hopefully that'll get resolved fairly quickly, so whether we end up including them in
Did
that
you-
final.
did you
I saw
s-
your.
Yeah, it was, I picked a number, and
yeah.
and Amy allocated, that's what that number would look like
Right.
across the townships and the villages.
Right.
I mean, we can adjust that number, but that is the
Right.
percentage of
Right.
how it would be split up.
But all those would have to make sure that they are qualified, and they would
Mhm.
also have to apply. I would imagine if we're going to take liability for that, they likewise would have to apply. So if we're going to have a
Correct. Yeah.
joint liability,
Right.
we better make sure that we have a full application like any other department,
Well-
any other project.
Because we are responsible.
We're
for any
responsible.
sub-recipient.
Yeah.
I agree. I guess the first step
Yeah.
for the townships and villages
Yeah.
would have to set a dollar amount, because we wouldn't want them applying for something.
Well,
Agreed.
so I understand the townships, some of the
Right.
villages are getting their own allocations.
Oh, they are? See, I thought the
Um,
villages were,
Townships, from what I understand, did
are
not.
not.
But I think that villages may.
I had not seen that the villages We're getting.
Well, there's a list already out there as to which villages and townships did. There were some townships, because they're like 50,
There were like
60,000, right, yeah,
Yeah.
over
Right.
in southwest Ohio. Yeah.
And they did reference today, too, I'll just add, if I may, in the webinar, that they're still taking comments on the interim final rule through July 9th.
Right.
So depending on responses, for example, from townships, that's been one that has been quite vocal in trying to get a different interpretation than they may receive their own allocations. Just the fact that there are still comments received through July 9, the dynamics may change a little.
But townships still have the opportunity to get funding through the state as sub-recipient.
Well, that's yet
Or
to
is
be
that-
determined, correct? That is yet to be determined. So I guess since we're waiting for those interim rules to be finally adopted, and we know what they are, maybe as part of our process, we also can at least come to agreement as to what few of these we need to really move now. And say, yeah, we're gonna take that pot aside, and it's like, no, there's a number of these things we actually do want to get done. Here's the pot that's gonna be going out and getting all the proposals.
And we have to see of
Yeah.
our villages who are getting funding.
Right, oh yeah,
Mhm.
exactly, yeah. Because
Yeah,
until they
and
give
I-
the final rules, we don't know.
Right, right. And
Are there
I think-
any projects that you guys are ready to go on from the manual Amy put back to?
I think the one in there that's probably most timely or critical from a time standpoint is the Fair Board.
Yes.
Yes, agreed.
And also, if we did decide to do the boiler at the county home, you would think we'd want to get bids and stuff out in time for the fall and winter, the weather change.
When was that project originally planned for? Was that, try to get that done this year for the county home?
We were actually probably going to have to do it next year, or the year after,
Oh.
because of funding.
Okay.
But if we could do that this year with these monies, that would be helpful,
All right.
because it needs to be done.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. My general, I guess, my attitude, remembering all this money is borrowed money from the federal. It maybe not be on our ledger in terms of the county, but it's on everybody's ledger, on
Yes.
our children's ledger, our grandchildren's ledger. It's got to be paid back. So I'm obviously emphasizing things that are permanent improvements,
Mhm.
capital improvements. Those are the investments. Normally, if we were going to be borrowing money and to do that kind of thing, okay, that's a
Steve,
no-brainer.
I wholeheartedly agree, because I
Yeah.
think we ought to invest in the county
Yes.
so that the county gets a long-term benefit.
Agreed.
And
However
the
we
boiler
spend
is
the money.
needed.
Agreed.
And
Oh,
since
yeah, absolutely.
those are the kinds of improvements in this book that
I would agree. So I think there's some, we
I-
have some consensus. Maybe we start
Mhm.
put that list and say, before we start this the process for submitting proposals and everything else, we have a few we know we're going to want to get done regardless.
Well, and the
Yeah.
Fair Board, if you look
Yeah.
at their request, it
Yep.
is, Amy, wouldn't you agree, completely related to COVID, completely would fall under the category? They have some expensive requirements to meet.
Well, they're doing revenue replacement.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Well, they also had
They-
some
Yeah.
upgrades to infrastructure
Oh,
in
did they?
terms of hands-free faucets and hands-free.
Is that on the
plumbing.
list?
It's not on the original spreadsheet in front. They submitted a packet late yesterday afternoon
Oh, okay.
that we included. It totals actually $126,845, and included in that are the touchless faucets,
Got it.
the automatic
Okay.
flush toilets,
Right.
cleaning for restrooms during the fair, some portable restrooms, cleaning supplies, and those types of
And-
things.
Besides those expenses, considering the revenue loss from last year,
Mm-hmm.
those expenses are much more difficult for them.
Right, right. So in terms of a scoring matrix, you had such a thing in the grant program. Do we have an idea of what characteristics and how we would score the characteristics? So, I mean, permanency of the improvement, I think, would be one. Other ideas?
Yeah, capital improvements would definitely score higher with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anything with 5 years or more life
Mhm.
is by definition the capital improvement.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And of course, like the first section of the application should list one of the 5 categories and how the project fits under the 5 categories.
I guess I need to go through the list and see what, are there any categories that really need to be addressed because of the time frame, as like the fairgrounds.
Right.
That makes sense. Some of these might be in there
Do either of you
too.
feel
I
that
just
there's
need
any
to.
more time-pressing ones beyond the fair?
I think that's the major one. I mean, we've got, what, about 6 weeks, 7 weeks till the fair? So I think if we can get that allocated, the rest of it, I think we should take our time, because it is much more restrictive than the prior grant, than the CARES funding. So I think we need to really think through it and really make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for the buck. So I have no problem waiting and thinking through it. And even, we've got what the departments want. Maybe we create a list and list out, or maybe we put it all down and each of you rank them by your priority. And then we go and we see which ones rank the highest.
Well, here's something, if we put out an application, we also have to make it clear that the county departments are prioritized, because some of these categories beyond county departments could potentially make requests.
Yeah, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but even nonprofits could technically make a request and potentially be funded.
And small businesses and.
Yeah, there's a whole
So,
host of
on
categories.
On this round, some of our capital improvements for the county would have to be prioritized,
I agree.
correct? So should that be the first thing we do, is the county and the boards associated with the county, we have a deadline for their application first? See what we get from just them?
When would you,
Well, I guess the question comes down to is what constitutes a county agency. There are different categories.
On
We
Rhonda's
don't have a
list,
specific.
you have the
Well,
resolution list.
Yeah, but there's some, we have some, a taxing authority, governing authority, we've got some relationship, others as independent government functions.
Do you want to just go straight county departments then
Well,
first?
no, I mean, what's a relationship with like Medina County Park District? Where they're not
Right.
taxing
I guess
authority,
I
we
would-
don't do their budget, they have a separate appointing authority, yet they are, in effect, almost a county. I mean, they're
right,
not the
right.
entire.
I guess I
Yeah.
would rather look at the impact of the project on the county
Right.
as opposed to whether they're us or not, so to speak.
I would agree.
So just,
Well, because I was counting boards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
so I know Amy did a nice job. She sent, requested information from the departments, which you have in front of you. And I think, and these are just county departments, including Health Department, Park District. We have, I think it's $65 million worth of requests. So now, not all of those qualify. I mean, going through, qualifies, doesn't qualify. But I think if you try to open it up and say we're going to let nonprofits, you already have used, what, $30 million more than what you are getting. So I think we've got a really good start here. The application that you're talking about, we've kind of done it in a preliminary sense. Now maybe we follow up and we get additional information on the project that we're requesting. But I think you've got a really good start here. So I don't know, as far as the application process, if you need to do that, because we've got the information here. And if you do an application process, you're going to get the exact same information.
Maybe what we need to do is I guess, put together an evaluation list or a criteria, what it is, a ranking, and figure out how we're going to, if you will, score these or evaluate each of them. And then kind of do it, let's share what we really think is important and kind of rank that and then start going through the list.
So are you suggesting the ones that have already submitted in this book have to redo the application that we come up
No.
with?
Well,
No.
I think to Scott's point is if we come up with a scoring matrix.
Yeah.
And here are the 5, 6, 7, however many characteristics we're going to benchmark against.
Right.
We can create that, and for each one of these projects, we can do a scoring
Sure.
matrix independently, the three of us,
Mhm.
and then bring them together and
Well, to
kind of
discuss,
tabulate
evaluate.
them, and then, right.
And I'm sure some of this will also require a little bit more information from the agency or the organization. I know that we have, this is an example, Medina Metropolitan Housing Authority. They've got a specific one project in mind, but it doesn't include the drop-in shelter that we've been talking about, and they have a full study that they want to do. So, and then we also know that there's, there's money being set aside at the state level for helping fund this. So I think those are the kind of things like, okay, that's going to take a little bit of while to help define what that project looks like. So at this point, I think we could try spending the money way too quick. We got to take our time.
Right.
I think we
there's
are.
no rush. I
I think we
agree.
are.
We don't have
I
to
just-
rush to do.
yeah, we have some that more immediate need, but most, we do not have to immediately spend this.
So, on our scoring matrix, what other characteristics are we going to have?
You said,
Good question.
but did you count impact to the community? You said it.
Okay.
Well, some of the necessary criteria impact to vulnerable populations,
Mhm.
which we know, homeless, disabled, so forth. I mean, those are the criteria already built in
Mhm.
to the funding.
But he's talking,
Unemployed, yeah.
what we score, how we.
Well, right, well-
Right.
Well, they first have to meet that, but likewise, if they have a high impact to that group,
Mhm.
I would put that kind of higher. I mean, if that was the intent.
So,
Yeah.
from a scale standpoint, 1 to 5? 5 being the highest, 1's the lowest?
Oh, I'm we're going to do a Likert scale.
Uh-huh.
That's right.
Is that a big enough range?
Oh, I think it is.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with it. Are you
Fine,
okay with it?
We'll see. Well, how many degrees of freedom, basically, comes down to. Yeah, how many variables do you have?
There are no
That
4.5s.
Yeah.
That's why I said, is it a big enough range?
No.
Depends on how many variables we have, how many factors. That's how you basically set your scale. What you want, decimals to the tenth or hundredths.
All right, so here's what I've jotted down since we've been talking about it.
Okay.
All right, so the permanency of the improvement, is it
Mhm.
greater than 5 years?
Mhm.
The category of how the project fits into the parameters that we have. Whether it's a county department versus a other department, agency, or entity that's applying. Are there other funds available to that agency or to that project? And the impact to the community. So Scott or Amy or?
I do have it. Well,
When you say impact to the community, is that number of residents benefiting?
I think you could look at it that way.
Okay, because I think that would be a great category to score.
I'll put that down as a IE, for example.
yeah.
Okay.
I do have a technical question. I mean, whoever receives this money is going to have to meet the same criteria that we would for spending. How does that apply to a business? How does that apply? I mean, you have an auditing trail whenever you go to a public entity. If we give it to Medina Metropolitan Housing Authority, they're publicly audited. Park District, publicly audited. A business isn't. An individual isn't. So how does that play out in terms of verifying that it has been appropriately spent? I'm just asking.
I think it's more restricted.
So, following the example from the
Right.
prior CARES funding,
Yeah.
any sub-grant that was allocated had a strict list of requirements that they had to adhere to and an acknowledgement that they would comply with those allowable uses. And then there was a follow-up component to that where they had to demonstrate that they had, in fact, spent those monies, whether that was a small business grant or that was the school districts, for example, with their fogging equipment to help them sanitize their schools. There was that full circle
Got it.
where they had to demonstrate that appropriate use.
Okay.
They too have to keep records.
Sure.
There's an opportunity, I would think, that they'd get pulled into an audit too if something were amiss. So
Okay.
we would want to
And
be real
since-
careful on
And
that.
since the businesses were so different and some of them were nonprofits,
Right.
any of them that had any specific taxing questions, we told them that they needed to seek advice from their own accountants.
Sure. Okay.
And interestingly enough, the grants were taxable income.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I was aware of that, actually. Yeah, okay.
So, do we want to set some deadlines?
I think we should.
So, should we have decisions?
It's much easier than the CARES Act where we had to say next Tuesday
Right,
because
right.
yeah,
Yeah, we have
we
some
just have so
time.
much more
So
time.
When are the interim rules supposedly, the comment period's over?
July 9th.
Okay.
Just a suggestion, if it's okay with you, if you're comfortable giving the Fair Board the $126,000, I'd like to get that on so we can get them the money and they can start the process of getting everything they need.
Sure, that would be, sure.
Are you okay with
wanna
getting?
make a motion?
Oh, yeah. Well, it'll have to be a resolution.
We can do a resolution on Tuesday.
Yeah, prepare that
Do you,
for
do you
Tuesday.
want to also do a resolution to start going out for bids or research on the boiler that's needed? I mean, I think those both are slam dunk needs.
Okay,
I think we should.
yeah, no, I'm fine.
Okay, I know Stephen has already spoken to several companies about that.
Right.
And then if it's okay with you, we can go ahead and put together a spreadsheet with each project, or we can put each project on a scoring sheet so that you can go through and start scoring. And since, I think, was it July 9th you said?
Correct.
Okay, so maybe it'll give you weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, to get the scores done for each of those projects. And then you can give them back to us. We can go ahead, put the scores down in a spreadsheet so you can see how each of you scored each of the projects, what the total scores are. And at that point in time, you can make some final determinations, or we can start making some determinations on what projects get funded, maybe look at the timing.
During any other proposals, is my question, because as I pointed out, we haven't done the full one on housing. We only have that one specifically because it's a project that he's been proposing for some period of time. We still have that plan, that development to go on.
So what's July 9th? Is there anything
That's when the
about that date?
that's when the rules, I think, are finalized.
Okay.
Because we're still
how
talking about
So how about
townships.
this? How about if we have an open period for submission of applications to continue until July 9th? And then we can take the time frame from July 9th to maybe the middle of August to evaluate them. We can do our scoring. And then we
Okay.
can come back in the end of August, beginning of September, and actually make some decisions on the projects that we want to fund.
But who are we taking applications from, like Scott said before? Are we doing nonprofits? Are we doing businesses? Or is this just?
I'm not at this point in favor of opening it up too wide, because, I mean, we already
agree.
have plenty of projects of our own, but like you said, there are some other housing projects that we may want to consider.
Right.
I don't know, and I think we're still waiting on some guidance as to what the definition and the possible use of a public safety employee is, and whether we can use funds to fund those kinds of programs. So.
Okay, here's the question I have. I had gone through this book and I took a bunch of notes on, what I prioritized. But there are some entities that have made several requests or sub-requests. So how are we going to how are we going to score it if I would say, yeah, I would fund this, like you said, the study. Yeah, I would fund the study, but maybe not yet the rest because I want to see how the project looks. So what are we going to do for the requests where there's 4 or 5 things on one request?
Well, we got one
Governor
department.
Colleen wants a line item veto.
Well, there
Each of
has
us
to
have that ability.
be, no,
Right.
but there has to, because some people ask for 4 and 5 things.
Yeah, I know, and they did put a total price, they put a total price with everything,
Right.
and they give us
Yes.
basically a Christmas list.
Yes.
That we get to choose from, actually.
Right, so I think those entities should have to individually submit their projects. Like if they have listed 4 or 5 things, I think each one of them should be scored. I don't know how else to do it for an entity that's asked for more than one thing that is completely unrelated. you wouldn't even be able to score your impact on the community.
Right.
Let's say if somebody's asked for a vehicle and then they've asked for a shed, I'm just throwing things out, a shed. I mean, how do you, yeah.
A staff refrigerator, how's that
Yeah.
related to a COVID? I'm just asking for
Well,
a friend.
Rhonda,
I think,
No, how's that related to COVID? I know it relates to Rhonda.
yeah, see,
We'll take that from another fight.
to eliminate some of those things, that's something Amy and I can go through, and we can make a note beside those projects we don't think we can justify. And
Yeah,
that way, when you go to score, you can see we're
But
thinking now. You may have a differing opinion,
Right.
and
But
you can
like,
override
okay.
us. But
So the
I agree.
park district, for example,
Mhm.
submitted 2 completely separate projects.
they would each be scored
I
separately.
think they need to be scored individually.
Agreed.
Yeah, so that's
Agreed.
my
Okay.
point is.
So then can we go on, and Amy, on your spreadsheet that you did for us, and actually break those down into separate components?
Is it
And
eligible or not
several-
eligible?
Several departments,
Yeah, yeah.
several departments submitted more than one thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Oh, yeah, indeed.
Okay, so we can go ahead. We'll create some kind of a score sheet and give you a copy of it, that you critique it, give it back to us with recommendations, and then once we have that, we can go ahead and start putting each individual project in those score sheets, and then we'll go ahead and request additional applications for anyone who may not have submitted in this first round.
I think we had to keep it open for
A little
30
while.
So-
We've got
Yeah.
some.
So give them until the end of June.
I think that's reasonable.
Yes.
Okay.
At this point, probably reasonable. Thereabouts. Well, I still would just go along with the date of when the interim rules will be approved.
July 9th?
Yeah, July 9th is the same as, because you got
Okay.
the 4th of July weekend, and, okay. That's okay.
I'm good. I'm good with
No,
that.
Okay.
Whether it's the
Economic
31st.
Development Corporation published this was yesterday, a list of all the aid that is coming down to affected industry. We were talking about helping small businesses, the affected tourism and so forth. I know some of that is an eligible category, but that has received also separate funding that's out there, that they have available now.
There's a whole nother vein
Yes.
of benefit that goes to tourism industry and
Well, that-
hotels.
I agree, and that's why I
That
think
is-
we ought to hold back and say, no, we've got a good list to work from. We don't need to expand it, because there are other, even the state expanded theirs to include bars and
Restaurants and
restaurants
all
and
that sort of
hotels and
stuff, right.
stuff. So
Isn't
there's a
that one
whole
of your
bunch.
scoring categories that you wrote down, access to other funds?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, so I think those are the kind of things like, okay, well, there's a good reason for us not to expand it a whole lot more.
Right.
In terms of the, like I said, the nonprofits and the businesses and the tourism industry that's been impacted. You know,
I would like to thank Amy and Scott and the
Oh, yeah.
team that these binders were great.
That was all Amy. So she did a great
Thank
job.
you, Amy.
yes, you did.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, very nice job.
But your job is not over.
So our first deadline then is July 9th.
Thank you.
And we're immediately moving forward with 2 projects
Correct.
Yes.
that really don't, it's not a huge percentage of the
Right, right.
pot.
Well, we have consensus on the board. We need to move forward on those.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we probably, do we want to have, do we want to just discuss this at our regular commissioner meetings, or do we want to
Yeah.
have separate meetings?
Well, why don't we,
specifically
is
for
someone
this
going to come
purpose?
up with a sample scoring or application or,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so we'll just discuss it at our regular commissioner
Yeah,
meetings?
I would.
Mhm.
Okay.
No sense doing, a separate process, or in terms of that discussion, that would be adequate. We'll be open to the public as of next week,
Right.
in terms of the public attendance,
Correct.
as well as public comment.
Yep,
So there's a great opportunity there.
right, okay.
I'm not sure for who, but, sorry.
So, are there any other topics that we need to talk about tonight then?
I guess reserve the right to add a scoring category if we
Oh,
think of one.
absolutely. Yep.
I think we can get them to Scott and Amy, and if there is something else, and we can talk about it next week.
I'm looking forward to stealing from some of the other counties.
Yes,
actually.
that's
What are
why
they
I
doing?
said that.
What are they doing and
I
how
think
are
it
they
would.
evaluating?
I think it would be great. I think it
Yes.
helped with the small business grant when we saw what some of the other counties were doing, and some of them were making it more complicated than necessary. We simplified ours, but
Right.
that was my point. And reserve the right if we saw a great category.
I'm open for that.
Well, I think
Sure.
we have the right to evaluate it and add additional criteria until the point we actually make the decision to fund or not fund. We reserve that right. Just makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. Always last-minute information that could be important with some of
Yes.
these projects, I'm sure.
All right.
All right.
Well, if there's nothing else to discuss,
Move to
motion to
adjourn?
adjourn?
Yeah.
Second,
roll call, please.
Hamblin?
Yes.
Sweattick?
Yes.
Hudson?
Yes. Thank you all. We'll
Thank
see
you.
you next Tuesday.
Wow, okay. Well under an hour.